Jake stood at the edge of the auction yard, watching the final bids crawl by. The sun hung low, casting long shadows, and most of the crowd had already wandered off, weary and unimpressed. But Jake remained, eyes scanning the lot. He wasn't looking for anything special, just something that still had a pulse. A quiet mechanic from a forgotten mining colony, Jake wasn't here for sleek designs or shiny hulls. He needed a ship, any ship, as long as it had an engine that blinked and wires he could pull life from. In the far corner, buried under a thick coat of dust, sat a forgotten wreck. Its hull was battered and dull, scratched from years of neglect. It hadn't flown in ages. That much was clear. When the loudspeaker called its number, no one stirred. Some in the thinning crowd chuckled. The auctioneer gave it a half-hearted pitch, his voice straining under the weight of indifference. Jake raised his hand. 1 credit, he said. Heads turned. A few smirks. A couple of laughs. 1 credit, the auctioneer echoed, struggling not to grin. Going once, going twice. Sold to the lonely human. Jake didn't flinch. With grease on his face and purpose in his step, he approached the derelict vessel. The hatch groaned as he forced it open. Inside, the air was thick with rust and time. He flicked on his torch and climbed aboard. The corridor was narrow, lined with frayed cables that swayed from the ceiling. Each step made the floor moan beneath him. He moved cautiously, passing a cramped storage bay, a long-abandoned control room, and then he stopped. Something was humming. Not a sound like a machine, more like a soft pulse, a heartbeat. He followed step by step down a side corridor. The hum grew louder. He reached the sealed door. It was round like a vault. The lights around it blinked red. Jake touched the panel beside it, and surprisingly, it lit up. He pressed a few buttons, and with a loud hiss, the door opened. Inside was a room filled with dim blue light, and in the center was a pod. It floated above the ground, glowing softly. It looked untouched. The rest of the ship was broken and forgotten, but this pod was perfect. Inside it, he saw a figure, a woman, tall, with silver skin, long dark hair floating gently, and eyes closed. She looked asleep, or frozen. Her hands folded on her chest, like she was dreaming. Jake stepped closer. He had never seen an alien like her. Her armor was golden, cracked in some places but still shining. She did not look dead. No frost, no signs of age, just sleeping. Her lips moved just a little, and the humming grew louder. Suddenly, the lights around the pod flashed green, then yellow, then green again. The ship shuddered, and Jake stumbled back. The door behind him slammed shut. The console beside the pod lit up with strange symbols. Then, slowly, the pod opened with a hiss and warm air spilled out. Jake stared as the alien woman inside opened her eyes. They were bright green, glowing with light. Her gaze met his, and she blinked slowly. Then again. Her lips parted. She tried to speak, but no words came. She lifted one hand, then fell back, weak. Jake did not move. His heart was racing. The ship began to make strange noises. A soft voice echoed through the walls, speaking a language he did not understand. Then, in broken English, it said one word. Guardian. The room turned cold. A loud click came from above. Jake looked up and saw small lights turning on, one by one, across the ceiling. Then the voice said again, Guardian Protocol. Activate. Jake stood frozen. The woman was breathing slowly, her chest rising, her eyes still watching him. He did not know what he had bought, but it was not just a ship. It was a secret, a prison, or maybe something worse. The pod hissed open fully. The woman took a deep breath and whispered something he could not understand. Then she reached out and she touched his arm. Her hand was warm but strong. She looked at him with a deep sadness and something else. Jake wanted to speak, but the words would not come. He had only wanted scrap metal, but now he was standing in front of something lost, something ancient. And outside, the stars blinked quietly, but inside the ship, a story was waking up, one that had been asleep for years. Maybe Centuri-san. Jake was now part of it. Jake stood in the quiet chamber. The air was heavy. The alien woman had not moved much since she touched his arm. Her skin was smooth like stone, but warm. Her eyes still glowed faintly green, and her lips moved as if whispering something ancient, something forgotten. Her voice was too soft for him to understand, and yet the ship reacted to her every breath. He tried to step back, but the door behind him was locked, sealed without a sound. The console lights blinked faster, now pulsing in rhythm with the woman's heartbeat. Jake stared at her, unsure if he should run or help her. She looked peaceful, but the ship felt tense, like it was waiting for something. Waiting for him. Suddenly, the walls began to hum again, soft at first, then louder, like a chorus of distant voices. The lights above flickered, and the voice from before returned. Guardian protocol confirmed. Fire and presence authorized. Emergency core stabilizing. Jake stepped closer to the pod. He could see frost melting along its edges. The temperature was changing, the room growing warmer. The glow from the woman's body began to fade slowly. She blinked again, and this time her lips formed a single word, "Not from this world." She tried to stand, but her legs trembled. Jake caught her before she could fall. She was light like feathers, and yet there was strength under her skin, as if she had once been a warrior. She looked up into his face, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. Her voice was still broken, but she whispered again, "You opened it. You are chosen." Jake shook his head, trying to understand. Chosen for what? He had only wanted to take some parts, maybe fix a few panels. But now the ship was alive, and its passenger was calling him something he did not want. A belly flow below them shifted with a groan, and then a path of blue lights appeared, leading out of the chamber. Jake looked at the woman, who nodded slowly, as if to say, "Follow." He helped her walk, step by step, down the glowing path through narrow halls and broken control rooms. He had explored these parts before, but now the ship looked different, cleaner, brighter, as if it had been sleeping, and her presence was waking it. They stopped at the central command deck, the room where the pilot once sat. The chair in the center began to rise slowly from the floor. Lights danced around it, and the walls came alive with screens showing stars, maps, old logs. The woman raised her hand, and the screens changed to symbols Jake could not read. She touched the chair, and a soft beam of light scanned her body. The voice returned. Life form identified. Vessel bonded. Activating systems. Full power restoring. Jake turned to ask her what this meant, when she sat down and closed her eyes. The ship shook gently, and outside the stars began to shift. They were moving. The ship was flying again after all these years. She opened her eyes and looked at him, her voice still faint, but clearer now. "You woke me from the long dark. The bond is real. I am Lyra, daughter of Elinari, last of the guardian blood." Jake stared, confused. Bond? What bond? He was just a man from a mining colony, not a hero, not a pilot. He did not belong in this story, and yet she kept looking at him like he mattered. Lyra pointed to his hand and, "There," he saw something strange. A faint mark glowing beneath his skin, like a symbol. It had not been there before. He touched it and felt a pulse-like heat inside his vein. She said, "The ship chose you. You are not just a visitor now. You are part of its heart, and it will protect you." Jake tried to understand what that meant, but before he could ask, the ship made a warning sound. An alarm, quiet but urgent. "Incoming signal. Tracking beacon detected." Lyra's face turned serious. She stood slowly and walked to one of the screens. It showed a small red dot, blinking closer and closer. She said, "They found me. They always find me." Jake asked, "Who are they? What do they want?" She replied in a voice full of sorrow, "Hunters of the old war. They seek to finish what they started. They want the last guardian dead and the ship destroyed." Jake looked at the screen. The red dot was moving fast. He had no weapons, no plans, and now he was caught in something far bigger than himself. He turned to Lyra and said, "What do we do?" She looked at him with eyes that glowed once more and said, "We run." The ship began to move faster, engines roaring to life, walls trembling with ancient power. And Jake realized this was not just a ship anymore. It was a living memory, and he was inside it with the last piece of a forgotten war. And the enemy was coming. The ship sped through deep space, stars stretching into lines of silver as the engines roared with an ancient strength. Jake stood behind Lyra, watching her hands glide over glowing symbols. The way she moved was like a dance, each motion connecting her to the ship like they were one. He wanted to ask questions, too many questions, but the urgency in her eyes told him to wait. Wait until they were safe, if such a thing existed anymore. The alarm had gone quiet, but the red signal still blinked on one of the side panels, tracking slow and steady, following them no matter how fast they flew. Jake wondered how long she had been asleep, how long the ship had hidden in the scrapyard before he arrived, like some strange accident, or maybe something planned. Lyra looked over at him, her voice stronger now, but still calm, like a wind before a storm. "There is a reason you found this ship, Jake. It is not chance. You carry the mark because the ship accepted you. It would not have opened for anyone else." Jake pointed at his hand, where the mark still glowed faintly. He said, "But why me? I was just looking for parts." She nodded. "Yes, you were looking for pieces, and the ship was looking for a soul. Now it has both." The words sounded like prophecy, too big for him to hold. But he stayed silent, watching her as she pulled up a set of ancient logs on the screen. They were old, dusty, even in digital form, and filled with strange characters and faded images, ships burning, planets cracked, voices screaming names that meant nothing to him. This was the end of her world. Lyra tapped one of the logs, and a hologram appeared in the air. A memory from long ago of a great hall filled with her people. Silver skin, with eyes like stars. Warriors standing in armor, speaking in a tongue Jake could not understand. But their faces were filled with fear and fire. She whispered, "That was the last council, the day we chose to scatter, to hide. The Guardians were hunted. Our bond with the living ships was seen as a threat. They feared what we could become." Jake watched the hologram flicker. It showed ships breaking apart in space, screams, weapons fire, and then one ship escaping. This one, the one they stood in now. "That was me," she said quietly. "I was sent into sleep until the war ended, but I slept too long, and now all the others are gone. Jake felt the weight of her words pressing down like gravity. The ship had carried her through time, across war and silence and rust. And he had woken her up with nothing more than curiosity and a single bid. He asked if they were all gone. The Guardian nodded. Yes, and now I am the last, and they will not stop until even my bones are dust. The ship suddenly trembled. A warning flashed across the screen. Lyra looked, and her face went cold. They're here. She rushed to the window. A shadow appeared in the stars. A ship, sleek and smooth like glass, shaped like a spear, moving faster than light itself. It was not big, but it was terrifying in the way it moved. Without sound or trail, like a ghost. Lyra returned to him. You must go. Hide in the lower chamber. The ship will shield you. Jake said, No, I'm not leaving you. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The bond is growing. I can feel it. Your presence stabilizes the ship. It listens to you as much as it listens to me. Now Jake stepped closer. He touched the panel beside her, and the ship responded. The controls shifted slightly, adapting to his touch. Lights realigned like it was learning his rhythm. She said, Your mind is strong. That is rare among your kind. The ship sees it, your thoughts, your fears. It accepts them. You are not just chosen, you are compatible. He looked at her, then at the dark ship drawing closer on the screen. What does it want? He asked. She whispered, It wants to erase history, to destroy every trace of what we were, to end the story completely. The lights dimmed. A low hum filled the walls. The ship was preparing for something. Jake could feel it in his bones, a vibration deeper than sound. The ship was alive, and it was ready. Lyra turned to him, her eyes glowing again. Now we show them, she said, that history is not so easy to erase. A screen flashed a final warning. Impact within 60 seconds. The enemy had locked onto them. A pulse beam charged on its side, glowing red, ready to fire. Jake reached for the console, not knowing what to do, but the ship guided his hands. Lyra placed hers over his, and the controls fused under their touch. Lights danced. Their fingers glowed. The bond became one. Outside, the stars watched in silence. Then the battle began. The black enemy ship moved without sound through the void. Its sharp design made it look more like a weapon than a vessel. It glided between stars, like it belonged to darkness itself. Its surface shimmered with invisible armor, and at its center burned a red eye, like a heart that had never known kindness. Inside the Guardian ship, Jake and Lyra stood together, hands on the console, their bond now guiding the ship through instinct, not just controls. The vessel responded with life, as if it had waited years to awaken fully for this moment. The enemy ship fired a pulse beam. A flash of red energy exploded from its hull, moving like lightning toward them. Jake braced himself, but Lyra did not flinch. She whispered something in her native tongue, and the Guardian ship folded space. The stars around them bent. The beam passed through where they had just been. They reappeared behind a cluster of ice moons. Jake gasped. The ship had not dodged. It had vanished and reappeared, like magic. No, not magic, Lyra said softly. Memory. This ship remembers space in ways others cannot. But the enemy ship adjusted quickly. It turned and followed again, relentless. Jake stared at the screen. How is it tracking us? How does it know where to go? She replied, It is not tracking the ship. It is tracking me. He felt a strange pain in his chest, a sharp twist of fear and anger. Why do they want you so badly? What did you do? She looked at him, and for the first time her eyes showed guilt. "I served it." The ship shook as another blast hit the shields, this time closer. The walls trembled. Warning lights flared. The enemy was adapting, moving faster, pressing harder. Jake looked around the cockpit. Symbols flashing, signals beeping, strange alerts he could not read. Lyra spoke again. "They are forcing us to flee, but there is a place where they cannot follow. Not yet. It is far and hidden, but the ship can take us. Take us there now." Jake said, his voice low and steady, "Let's go." She nodded, and the console responded again. Symbols reformed, and the stars shifted. A new path appeared on the screen. It was not a straight line. It weaved through ancient routes, debris fields, forgotten zones, places where light barely reached. He asked, "What is this place?" She replied, "The Archway. It is a corridor between memories. Only ships like this one remember it. No map could show it. Only instinct. And the bond can guide them through." The enemy ship drew closer again, now firing smaller beams, trying to disable the engines. The Guardian ship dodged swiftly, but Jake could feel the strain, the metal groaning under pressure, the lights flickering like the ship was bleeding. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the ship. But it was not the same Guardian voice. This one was cold, sharp. It spoke in a cruel tone. "Surrender. The last Guardian must die. The ancient blood must end. No more waking. No more." Lyra closed her eyes and answered in her language, her voice steady and proud. The ship responded to her words, its core glowing brighter. The stars around them blurred as they entered the archway. The moment they crossed the threshold, Jake felt it. His vision spun. Gravity twisted. The ship stretched through space like it was being pulled by strings that had no direction. Everything outside turned into rivers of light and memory. Planets they passed had no name. Stars flickered with colours he had never seen. The archway was not a road. It was a dream, and only the Guardian ship could survive it. Lyra leaned on the console, breathing heavily. Jake held her steady. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, barely. "The archway draws power from me, and from you. It connects to our bond. It reads our trust and tests it." Jake looked at her, eyes glowing faintly. "You trust me then?" She looked at him with a soft smile. "You opened my prison. You stood beside me. When I asked you to run, you did not turn away. Even now, you stay. That is more than most ever did." He was about to speak when the lights flashed again. A burst of red light broke through the archway. One of the enemy ships had followed, somehow smaller but fast. Jake shouted, "How did it get in?" And Lyra stared in shock. "It must have been rebuilt with stolen tech. It is not supposed to survive here, but it will." The Guardian ship picked up speed, dodging energy bolts flying between memory rivers and shattered moons. The archway pulsed around them, bending with their emotions. Jake realized the ship was reading them deeper now. Every fear, every hope, every heartbeat. He placed his hand on the console and whispered, "Then read this. We are not giving up." A sudden surge of power rushed through the walls. The engines roared, brighter than ever. The Guardian ship spun around to face the enemy head-on. A hidden weapon emerged from its hull, old and silent, until Lyra whispered, "It has awakened." A single beam fired from the ship. It was white, silent, and perfect. It pierced the enemy ship through its center. No explosion, no flames. Just silence. And then the enemy ship was gone, erased like it never existed. Jake stood still, breathing hard. The stars settled again. The archway calmed. Lyra looked at him with wonder. You spoke to the ship with your will, and it listened completely. He replied, Then maybe you trust me too. They floated forward, deeper into the unknown. And behind them, the silence of the archway closed like a door no one else could follow. The archway began to fade. The stars returned one by one, blinking gently like they had been watching all along. The ship slowed, and the soft hum of energy dimmed. Jake stood in silence, his hands still on the console, his mind spinning. Not from fear this time, but from something else, something deeper. Lyra leaned back against the wall. Her eyes were tired, her breathing slow. Jake could see the light in her chest pulsing slower than before. He moved to help her. She nodded weakly and whispered, The ship is resting. We are safe. For now. He helped her to a chamber near the center of the ship. It looked like a resting room, though the walls shimmered with moving symbols that changed when he walked past them. They pulled gently to his steps, like the ship was feeling him, learning him. Lyra sat down and closed her eyes for a moment, her voice soft. The bond has grown faster than I expected. You were not like the others who tried to control the ship in the past. You do not force it, you feel it. Jake sat across from her, trying to make sense of it all. He had no training, no purpose. He was not special, yet everything around him acted like he was meant to be here, as if something had chosen him long before he ever stepped into that auction yard. He asked Lyra, How does this bond work? Why is it choosing me? She opened her eyes and said softly, The ship was built with cell steel. Its core is alive. It listens for resonance, for harmony. If your thoughts and emotions match its rhythm, it connects. And if the connection is deep enough, it becomes a bond. The kind that cannot be broken. Jake looked at his hand. The mark was glowing again, brighter than before. It felt warm, not like fire, more like memories. Something living inside him that was not his, but had always been part of him. Lyra leaned forward, her voice lower. I felt it. When you touched the console in battle, your mind reached out like a whisper, and the ship answered. That is not normal, Jake. That is rare, even among my people. Has it happened to others? Done this before, humans like me? She shook her head slowly. Never. Not one. A strange silence settled in the room. And then Lyra said something Jake was not expecting. When the ship bonded with you, it gave you access to more than just its systems. It gave you echoes. He repeated, What do you mean? She looked at him with a mix of wonder and fear. Echoes are memories, not yours, but from the ship, from its past pilots, from the bloodlines of the Guardians. If the bond is strong enough, you will feel them, see them, sometimes even live them. Jake leaned back, trying to understand it. And then, without warning, his mind was pulled into darkness. Not painful, not sudden, just like falling asleep too fast and waking up in someone else's dream. He stood on a battlefield, not his own, alien skies above him burning with light, armor on his chest, a blade of light in his hand. Beside him was Lyra, but not the same Lyra. Her armor was whole, her eyes brighter, and she looked at him like she knew him, like she had known him forever. The battle raged around them. Ships, fallen warriors, shouting names with strange tongues. Jake felt the weight of responsibility, the fear, the love he had for her. And then he felt it. The moment of betrayal. A shadow striking from behind. Lyra falling, and him screaming, a name he did not know but felt deep inside. And then he was back on the ship, breathing fast, eyes wide, sweat on his forehead. Lyra looked at him and said softly, "You saw it?" Jake nodded, not able to speak. "Yes," she said. "That was one of the echoes. One of many. The ship carries them all. It remembers more than we do, and now you are part of that memory." Jake whispered, "Who was I?" Lyra looked at him, not with answers, but with something heavier. "Maybe you were one of us. Maybe you are something more. Or maybe the bond is trying to tell us that your soul has walked this path before." Jake stood up, walked to the glowing wall, and placed his hand against it. The ship responded. Images flickered across the surface. More memories, more stories. He said, "If these are echoes, can we find out what happened to your people? What really ended the war?" Lyra stood beside him. "Yes, but the truth may be heavier than you expect. Not all echoes bring light. Some bring sorrow. And if you follow them, you may not return." Jake turned to her. "Then let us find them." The old ship stirred again, power returning, the humming louder, as if it, too, had been waiting for this choice. And in the silence between stars, something old awoke. The ship moved silently through the edge of the archway. Stars, now distant and dim. The silence around Jake and Lyra was heavy, not peaceful, but waiting, like something unseen was watching, like something just beyond the next moment was holding its breath. Jake sat in the main control chamber. The lights around him no longer blinked randomly. Now they moved in smooth waves, answering his thoughts. The bond had grown stronger. Each hour, each memory. The ship was no longer a machine. It was an extension of feeling. A vessel not just of travel, but of something deeper. Lyra stood beside him, quiet, her eyes fixed on a map filled with strange red marks. They had traced the signals through the echo chambers. Each location revealed broken logs, strange ruins, old pulses of energy, and stories sealed in walls. None had survivors. None had hope. At the last location, the pulse was different, not like the rest. It burned with light, strong, defiant. Jake placed his hand on the console, and the ship moved toward it. He did not speak. The ship already knew the path. As they approached the coordinates, a storm of energy began to rise. Static rushed through the walls. The ship groaned like it was pushing through water thick with memory. Lyra looked uneasy, her voice soft. "This place is not just history, it is sacred." A red planet below them turned slowly, half covered in metal, the other half in ash. It was not alive, but it was not dead either. The ship hovered above it. Jake stared at the surface. Something felt wrong, too quiet, too cold. And the ship agreed. The walls flashed red. Alarms filled the air. Something had locked onto them. Something massive. The enemy was already there. Lyra ran to the front window, her breath caught in her throat. It was not one ship. This time it was a fleet, not large but sharp, fast, like blades in the dark. Their symbols were ancient, matching the logs they had just seen. These were the ships that ended her people. These were the ships that hunted the last guardian. Jake tried to speak, but the ship spoke first. "Incoming fire. Evasive action engaged." The sky lit up with beams, red, white, blue streaks cutting across space. The guardian ship twisted, dodged, dived. Each move faster than thought. Jake could feel the strain. Like every shot hit his own chest. His fingers gripped the console, the mark on his hand now burning. Lyra shouted something in her language. The ship responded with a burst of light. A shield formed, but it was thin. It was old. It would not last. They were outnumbered, outgunned. Outgunned and nowhere to run, Jake said, "We make a stand." Lyra looked at him, unsure. "This is not your war." But Jake turned to her, eyes burning. "Now it is." The ship began to shift its shape, armor folding, revealing old systems hidden under time. Weapons once sealed for peace, now awakening for war. Jake did not know their names, but he knew what they could do. He felt it in his bones, in the ship, in the bond. The enemy fleet moved in a tight circle, surrounding them, slowly pushing them toward the planet's surface. They were trying to capture, not destroy. Not yet. Jake shouted into the console, "Give me control!" The ship paused a moment, then accepted his will. The chair beneath him shifted, lights poured over his body. The mark on his hand stretched across his arm, glowing symbols climbing his skin. He closed his eyes and saw the battlefield, not with sight, but with memory, and moved the ship with thought, not buttons. It danced through space, each move perfect, like remembering a song from childhood. Lasers fired from its side, sharp, precise beams cutting through one enemy ship, then another. Each explosion silent, but filled with weight. Lyra stood behind him in awe. "The bond has completed. You are not just a pilot. You are the soul the ship was waiting for." But the largest enemy ship remained untouched. It moved closer, opening a massive port in its center. Something dark inside began to rise. Jake saw it through the screen. It was not a weapon. It was a creature, a living machine. Twisted metal, an organ, a monster made for one purpose, to end Guardians. Lyra gasped, her voice shaking. "I thought they were myths. I thought they were forbidden." The creature launched forward, arms of fire reaching toward them. The Guardian ship fired everything it had, but the monster kept coming, its body absorbing the light. Jake gritted his teeth. "This ends now." He reached deeper into the bond. The ship responded by opening its core. A chamber beneath the cockpit glowed white. Jake left the chair, walked down into the heart of the ship. Lyra followed. The walls here were alive, glowing with memories, voices, whispers, laughter, tears, all fused into one. At the center stood a crystal, spinning gently. It pulsed like a heart. Jake placed his hand on it, and the ship screamed. Not in pain, but in power. A light burst from the ship, brighter than anything they had seen. It struck the monster outside, freezing it in time, holding it still. Jake fell to his knees, the light now inside him. The echoes, all speaking at once. Lyra caught him, her voice scared. "Jake, what did you do?" He looked up, his eyes now blown wide like stars. "I remembered everything." Outside, the monster shattered into dust, and the sky went quiet again. The silence after the battle was deeper than space itself. The stars blinked like watchers, afraid to speak. The remains of the enemy ships drifted in pieces, some glowing dimly, some fading into the black void. Jake stood in the heart of the Guardian ship, his body still glowing faintly, his hands shaking. Not from pain, but from something more, something that could not be named. The crystal core behind him pulsed slower now, gentle like a sleeping breath. The bond had reached its peak, and in that moment Jake was no longer just a man, no longer just a mechanic, no longer just the one who won a ship at auction. He was something else, something ancient and newly born, but all at once. Lyra stood near him, her eyes wide, filled with wonder and sorrow. She stepped forward slowly, her voice soft and trembling. You unlocked the entire core. You remembered more than just the ship. You remembered who you were. Jake looked at her, his voice distant. I saw everything, every war, every loss, every vow, every death. I saw the moment you were sealed away. I saw your tears, your pain, your hope. I saw myself beside you, before the war, before the end, before the silence. Lyra took his hand and whispered, then it was true. We were bonded long before this life. He nodded slowly. The bond did not begin when I opened the pod. It began long ago, in another form, another time. The ship did not just choose me because I touched it. It chose me because I never stopped searching for you. The ship hummed softly, as if listening, as if remembering. Then Lyra placed her hand on the console. The walls glowed, and the voice of the ship spoke for the first time, not in warning, not an alarm, but in peace. Bond complete, unity confirmed, vessel and souls aligned, status, Guardian reborn. Jake felt something rise inside him, not power, not pride, something else, a calm, a stillness like the moment before dawn. He turned to Lyra and said, "What happens now?" She looked at him and said, "The war is over, the enemies are gone, the Guardians are no more, but the ship remains, and so does the bond. It needs a soul, and now it has one." She smiled gently. "I was once its pilot, but now I am its memory. You are its heart. We both belong to it now, but it belongs to you." He reached for her hand and felt the same warmth from the day he first touched her skin in the pod. Not cold, not strange, not alien, just familiar, like home. The ship began to move again, slowly turning toward the stars ahead, the red planet behind them shrinking into the distance. Lyra looked out the window and whispered, "We can go anywhere now. The ship is free." So Weejik stood beside her, but a thought burned inside him. Do I return? Do I go back to my world? To my life? She looked at him and asked, "Is that world still your home?" He did not answer at first. Instead, he closed his eyes and listened. The ship spoke to him, not in words, but in feelings. It showed him future paths, doors waiting to open, stars waiting to be named. He saw himself not as a man lost in the galaxy, but as a guide, as a protector, as something larger than before. He turned to her, his voice calm. "No, my home is not behind me anymore. My home is here, with you, with this ship, with this bond." She reached for his face, touched it gently, and said, "Then let us go where no maps exist. Let us find the forgotten. Let us write new echoes into the stars." They stood in the center of the vessel. The lights above them formed a circle spinning gently. The walls opened, revealing new rooms, chambers sealed for centuries, each glowing with potential. The ship was no longer asleep. It was no longer hiding. It was ready. Jake sat in the pilot chair. It welcomed him. Not as a tool, but as a partner. Symbols moved like breath, and with a single thought, the stars shifted. Outside, the engines ignited, not with noise, but with memory. Lyra sat beside him, her armor repaired, her gaze steady, her hand in his. And in that moment, Jake understood. He had not won a ship at auction. He had not found a prisoner or a relic. He had found his purpose, his partner, his path. As the ship flew into the unknown, the guardian voice spoke once more. Destination undefined. Heart confirmed. Path forward. And far behind them, in the ruins of silence, a single light remained, blinking quietly, waiting for the next soul to answer